Julian McMahon's death at 56 didn't just dim Hollywood's glow for a moment, it yanked back a velvet curtain and exposed a decades-long drama playing out behind that trademark smirk. Here was the son of an Australian Prime Minister, raised beneath chandeliers and presidential portraits, expected to follow a polished path of power. Yet even as a teenager, he rebelled against perfectly pressed dinner jackets and parliamentary handshakes, sneaking out to nightclubs where cheap amplifier buzz drowned out talk of cabinet reshuffles. Casting agents noticed the angular cheekbones first, then the dangerous glint that said he couldn't be contained by speeches or silver spoons. When he landed a role on Home and Away, tabloids framed it as a prince slumming it on a beach with extras. But Julian felt alive for the first time. Salt in his hair, fluorescent lights set lights in his eyes, and no one ordering him to keep his shoulders square for the cameras. That freedom only fueled his next defiant act, falling in love on set with Dany Minogue, a pocket-sized powerhouse who had already conquered pop charts on her own terms. They whispered lines between takes, shared fish and chip dinners on sticky trailers, and declared they'd be different to meteors burning through inherited expectations. Invitations went out for a wedding, the gossip columns labeled Australian royalty meets so-planned idol. But one gilded envelope boomeranged back unopened. Lady Sonia McMahon, famed for sashaying through international galas in that jaw-dropping, white dress slit to the navel, refused to bless the match. Friends claimed she muttered that her future daughter-in-law's last name read like a marquee, not a coat of arms. Still, Julian convinced Dany they could melt ice with persistence. The ceremony began without the matriarch. Strings played, reporters elbowed for angles. Then, moments before vows, the great dame herself swept in, diamonds flashing like warning lights. Witnesses later swore the temperature dropped 10 degrees. During the reception, Dany tried to thank her new mother for attending, only to be waved away as if she were a wayward caterer. Behind closed doors, Julian begged the two women in his life to talk, but every conversation ended with slammed doors and brittle smiles. Even the honeymoon felt haunted. Room service trays cooled while the newlyweds fielded calls about family reputation and proper alliances. When the couple relocated to LA, the distance from Sydney's gossip pages offered a brief reprieve until money troubles struck. Julian auditioned for bit parts opposite actors, half as enthusiastic, losing roles to names whose fathers couldn't even pronounce prime minister. Meanwhile, Dany hopped transatlantic flights, belting chart toppers to keep their rented Melrose apartment afloat. Sleepless, she penned love letters on airplane napkins, only to land and discover another frosty voicemail from Lady Sonia, advising her to find a more suitable diversion. Each snub lodged between husband and wife like a microscopic shard, invisible yet excruciating. 16 months after I Do, Julian answered a late-night call from his mother and emerged pale. By sunrise, he and Dany were drafting amicable statements for the press. Decades later, Dany would confess the divorce papers arrived, signed in blue ink that looked suspiciously neater than Julian's own handwriting. She never could prove the signature wasn't his. She also never forgot that at the final settlement meeting, Lady Sonia's chauffeur waited in the lobby, engine running. Julian buried himself in work because empty calendars screamed louder than grief. When Charmed cast him as the seductive demon Cole Turner, the role fit like custom leather, charming, tortured, doomed. Fan mail stacked to the ceiling, much of it marveling at the chemistry between him and co-star Shannon Doherty. Studio executives noticed too, pairing the two for press tours that often ran later than scheduled. During one such tour, Julian met Brooke Burns at a film premiere. The Baywatch beauty radiated a sun-kissed sincerity he hadn't felt since his first beachside sets. Their whirlwind was pure celluloid fantasy, Malibu dates, laughter echoing off convertible windshields. A spontaneous engagement before Christmas lights came down. Yet even fairy tales have a ticking clock. While Brooke soothed their newborn daughter, Madison through midnight feeds, tabloids teased rumors of a behind-the-scenes affair on the Charmed lot. One cover splashed Cole's real-life spell in scarlet font alongside grainy photos of Julian and Shannon sharing what could have been a script review or something more electric. Brooke confronted Julian, heart pounding louder than the surf outside their Pacific Palisades home. He admitted the fling. She packed up baby clothes and a lifetime's worth of what-ifs. Friends say Julian stood in the driveway after the moving truck disappeared, clutching a tiny pink sock abandoned beneath a hedge until dawn smeared violet across the sky. Public humiliation seared deeper than any parental rebuke. Casting directors hesitated now, weighing audience backlash. Julian responded by sharpening his craft. Channeling every personal catastrophe into the vain, morally bankrupt Dr. Christian Troy on Nip Tuck, viewers devoured the performance part Adonis, part wrecking ball. Critics called the character impossibly magnetic and alarmingly human. Meanwhile, behind studio gates, Julian accepted therapy appointments between call times. Acknowledging patterns of sabotage he once brushed off as bad luck, healing arrived wearing a quietly confident smile. Kelly Penagua slipped into his life through mutual friends too discreet to sell stories. Their first date unfolded in a sleepy Silver Lake cafe, where no one recognized him because he was sporting a baseball cap and humility. Kelly listened more than she spoke, sipped chamomile, and asked what made him happy outside of acting. The question stunned him. Soon evenings filled with farmers, market strolls, Sunday hikes, and dinners on the sofa where celebrity didn't warrant a mention. A year passed, then 5, then 10. Industry insiders whispered the relationship must be fragile because no paparazzi photos existed. The truth was simpler, they functioned without headlines. They turned off phones during thunderstorms to count seconds between lightning and thunder. Madison, now a discerning teen, visited and pronounced Kelly the calm dad's been chasing. That endorsement set the stage for altitude-high romance. On a red-eye bound for Paris, Julian grew jittery. The ring box practically vibrated in his pocket. Mid-flight turbulence jostled trays, and he took it as cosmic permission to dive in. He stammered a proposal that merged vows with apologies for every broken promise he'd ever made. Kelly's breath caught. Madison clapped. A flight attendant discreetly offered champagne in plastic cups. 6 months later, in the French countryside, guests believed they were attending a birthday picnic until a violinist switched from Vivaldi to a soft wedding march. Kelly walked across dukist grass barefoot, the picture of serenity. Notably, absent any trace of McMahon family scorn, Lady Sonia's health had already begun its downward slide, and whether she approved or even knew remains unanswered. For 9 golden years, the couple orbited away from scandal. Julian accepted character roles that let him vanish inside storytelling, rather than burn under gossip's spotlight. He mentored new actors, sent goofy voice memos to Madison at college, and cultivated a garden in Calabasas, bigger than the prime ministerial rosebeds of his childhood rebellion in tomato vines. So, when fans noticed subtle weight loss on press junkets, they attributed it to vegan smoothies or marathon training. Only Kelly and a tight medical team understood the brutal truth. A rare fast-moving cancer was stealing his energy cell by cell. Treatments were scheduled around filming for an indie thriller he insisted on finishing. Co-stars recalled him whispering affirmations between takes, makeup artists dabbing sweat that smelled faintly of sterile clinics. He refused pity, telling friends he'd rather be remembered swinging for the fences than fading behind drawn curtains. Still nightfalls were cruel. Kelly documented medication times on color-coded sticky notes, each scribble a fragile promise of more tomorrows. Julian spent insomniac hours scrolling photos weeding smiles. Madison's kindergarten art. Even paparazzi shots he used to despise each image, a breadcrumb trail proving he had, indeed, lived loudly. Sometimes his gaze drifted to an old framed clipping, a young Lady Sonia dazzling the White House in 1971, the infamous gown splitting opinion and headlines. He wondered whether audacity was hereditary, whether his mother's obstinacy mirrored his own reckless romances. Rumors of a private reconciliation circulated after Lady Sonia's 2010 passing. An anonymous staffer claimed Julian visited the hospice days before her final breath, emerging tear-streaked yet lighter. Another insider swore the two never met, that pride remained undefeated until the end. Julian never clarified, perhaps seeing value in mystery. After all, a definitive answer might cement pain and stone, whereas ambiguity let both love and regret breathe simultaneously. When the inevitable final decline arrived, Kelly organized a small bedside vigil. Madison read childhood diary entries aloud, reminding her father of days he'd built fairy houses under eucalyptus trees and declared them diplomatic embassies free from divorce, fallout. Julian managed a chuckle, then drifted asleep as dawn painted the room peach. He took his last breath before sunrise fully crowned the horizon. A timing that somehow felt poetic, always leaving the stage moments before the spotlight beamed. Hottest. News broke midday. Social feeds flooded with GIFs of Cole Turner smoldering, Of Christian Troy's devilish wink. Of red carpet interviews where Julian laughed too loud at his own jokes. Hashtags trended globally, some celebrating a legend, others confessing they hadn't known about his illness. Within hours, think pieces dissected his marriages, ranking heartbreaks like box office numbers. Yet the deepest story, the undercurrent of maternal conflict and private redemption, eluded clickbait headlines. It lives instead in the silences, the unanswered interview questions about his upbringing. The way he'd pause when someone mentioned family. The half-smile he offered before steering conversation back to colleagues. Kelly, ever graceful, released a single-paragraph tribute, gratitude for the public's love, a request for privacy, and a promise that Julian's greatest role was partner, father, seeker of joy. She ended with a line that sparked internet sleuths into frenzy. He finally found peace. Did that mean reconciliation with his mother? Resolve with his past? Or simply a man exhausted by battle finding stillness? The statement, like much of Julian's life, invited your own interpretation. Fans gathered outside the Hollywood Forever Cemetery on the day of a private memorial. They placed roses beside vintage Nip Tuck DVDs, scribbled letters thanking him for portraying flawed heroes who taught them that darkness and desire aren't mutually exclusive. One fan tucked a program from an Australian political gala beneath the flowers on odd relic until you remembered Julian's lineage. The gesture captured his life's push-pull perfectly, political pedigree, intertwined with pop culture fascination. In the weeks that followed, colleagues recounted never-before-told anecdotes on podcasts. A Nip Tuck director remembered Julian, improvising a scene where a patient confronted vanity, adding an unscripted monologue about masks we wear to please our parents. Crew members huddled behind monitors wiped tears, recognizing the actor was bleeding truth onto celluloid. A stunt coordinator revealed Julian did his own ice-cold plunge for a dream sequence because he wanted the shock to read authentic. Life's too short for lukewarm. He joked, irony lost then, painfully clear now. Madison, inheriting both her father's poise and her grandmother's sparkle, granted a single interview months later. She spoke of dual realities, a dad who cheered her softball hits with embarrassing dance moves and a public figure juggling reputations. She confirmed Julian kept a journal titled Second Chances filled with letters, some to her, some to a person whose initials matched Lady Sonia's. Madison didn't read them. She said the act of writing was his closure, and prying would cheapen it. Viewers, expecting sensational reveals, instead received a quiet testament to complexity. Comment sections turned reflective. Perhaps the real scandal is that we demand neat endings from messy human lives. Today, you can stream Julian's catalog in a weekend, binging demons and surgeons and charming villains, but you won't see the boy skipping parliamentary receptions to practice monologues or the husband standing alone with a forgotten baby sock. You won't feel the chill that swept a wedding aisle or the fiery shame of tabloid betrayal. Yet threads of every wound and triumph shimmer in his performances if you know where to look. A flicker behind the eyes when a character mentions fathers. A catch in his throat when love turns conditional. And maybe that is Julian McMahon's final gift, proof that a smile can be both invitation and shield, that a public fall can fertilize personal growth, and that forgiveness, whether granted or craved, drives the best stories, even when audiences never see the final scene. So the next time his face appears on your screen, remember the rebellious son who ran from politics but never outpaced legacy. The lover who sabotaged happiness yet kept daring to chase it. The patient who fought cancer in silence so fans could keep their fantasy intact. Remember that behind every perfectly lit close-up lies a tangle of heartstrings. Some mended, some frayed, all undeniably human, because in the end, Julian didn't just act, he lived as a cautionary tale and an anthem of resilience rolled into one, teaching us that the real drama isn't in fame's fireworks but in the quiet moments when we decide whether to repeat old mistakes or write daring new lines. And if that realization keeps you watching a little longer, leaning in for the next reveal, then his story and this one has done its job.